Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I don't know if you knew, but there were French riots that were going on. I want to go through what happened, what this was all about, the intensity of it, the implications, just look at it as much as I possibly can. Before we do that, I want to let you guys know, if you didn't already know, today, and I'm recording this on Friday, by the way. The date today is 7/7 because it's July 7th, and 2023, if you add the numbers up together, equals 7. 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 0, I guess, 7. And I know some of you are more into this than others. I kind of take it with a grain of salt. I feel like there are times actually when the date actually seems to matter as far as its numerical value. I don't know how you guys feel about that. So I'm just kind of like on the fence about it a little bit. But I decided to put together this spreadsheet. This is under a new tab called Years, Numerical Values, where I've taken every year this century and added them up in column E, where you have the sum. All right. And so the number of years this century that add up to 7, there are 6 of them. We are on the third of 6. The next one is going to be in 2032. And then 2041, and then 2050. And that's it. And then I have all the other years and their values. So if you're into this kind of thing, this is maybe something that you can reference. But I just thought that was interesting that today is 7/7/7. And I do feel like the last week or two, both personally in my personal life and um, at a national scale and on a worldwide scale, has been kind of crazy. So maybe there's something to it. I'm not aware of anything particularly significant that's happened today, but there you go. So 777, the number of perfection and the number of completion. All right. And then before we get into the riots, here is the update on the Book of Mormon challenge, the Flood the Earth challenge. We have shared a total of 6,096 copies of the Book of Mormon. Which is up 7 from the last time that I updated it. We've had one more person join the challenge to bring us to 614. 14 is 2 sevens, by the way. And then here's the other report of someone meeting with missionaries, which brings us to 55 people that have reported their people that they shared the Book of Mormon with meeting with the missionaries. 55. And that was by Arith Lizaraga Olascoaga, my friend from Spain. He served in the same mission, but at a different time. He served before me. So he had given a Book of Mormon, and that person has come to church and is meeting with the missionaries. So let's all pray for all these people that they'll feel the Spirit and feel prompted to get baptized and join the church. All right, so I'm going to go to my timeline. I also just want to point this out, going along with the idea of the numerical value and of dates and stuff like that. Remember the earthquake that caused the angel Moroni to drop his trumpet from the Salt Lake Temple back in 2020. That was on the 18th of March. That happened on the 77th day of the year. I do tend to think that that was intentional, part of God's order of things. Can I say that for sure? No, I can't. But I think that that's interesting. But coming to the present, can't even see the thing there. Okay. So I've added these French riots. Okay. 17-year-old Nahel Merzouk killed by French police, and nationwide riots ensue. Starting on the 27th of June. Another 7. And then 17. All right. So let's get into this. So this is from BBC. France riots fueled by everyday discrimination, because that's always the cause of everything that's bad in the world. And I'm not trying to downplay that, by the way. There really is obviously discrimination, racism, but it's obviously also a political card being played right now. And I have different ideas about what's going on here, and I would invite you to put in the comments what you think about this situation if you've been following it or after we cover it. I'd like to know what you heard. So I started reading this article, but there wasn't much substance to it. I guess there kind of is, but it's mostly like a opinion piece. But it starts out: the riots which spread countrywide after the killing of police of Nahel M, a 17-year-old boy of Algerian origin, have shaken French society to its very core. The unrest has been described as unprecedented in terms of scale and intensity. And that's what caught my attention, but to my dismay, the author doesn't go over, the scale. He just kind of goes into his own personal experience in Canada and the ills of Western society and all that stuff. This is the young man that was killed. All right, that was Nahel. So, and of course, hopefully nobody enjoys seeing anybody die for any reason, uh, justified or not. Killing, dying, it's not a pleasant thing, no matter the circumstances. So, prayers to him and his family, despite whether he was in the right or the wrong, whatever. Okay, now going on to this next article. This is from the Associated Press. France's small towns are reeling from the spread of rioting. Now it's affecting the countryside. So this article does go into the numbers and some of the things here. In fact, they have this map here. It says unrest has broken out in hundreds of cities, towns, and villages across France in the wake of a police shooting of teen driver outside Paris on June 27th. The Associated Press confirmed riots or other unrest since the shooting in 297 locations. Another 7. So here you go, just like all over the country. It looks pretty bad. But they give some numbers down here. Okay. By the government's count, more than 500 cities, towns, and villages were affected this time after the police shooting of Nahel Merzouk, or I don't know how you pronounce that, in the Paris suburb of Nanterre on June 27th. The French-born 17-year-old of North African descent was stopped by 2 officers on motorbikes who subsequently told investigators that he had been driving dangerously in a bright yellow Mercedes. And there's a video of the stop, by the way, like a short video of a bystander that was recording the incident. He died from a single shot through his left arm and chest. One officer is being held on a preliminary charge of voluntary homicide. From Nanterre, violent protests spread with astounding speed and intensity. Now, I don't think that is too astounding, because I feel like something else is going on here, why this is happening. Okay. I have great suspicion, I guess, when it comes to these like big flare-ups, that cause destruction and havoc and chaos. There's times that I feel like it's not organic. Although that's what, they would have you believe, that this is just an organic response, backlash, outcry to some injustice, where I tend to think that, maybe there may have been some of that, yes, organically, but not to the extent that it gets in the case of this and other things that have taken place, like Black Lives Matter. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna share with you what I think exacerbates it, what makes it so big. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But anyway, they quickly morphed into generalized mayhem. See, now this is the transition point right here. So you would have had some natural, organic upset of those that felt that they are in the right, or that this was just completely unjust or whatever. But look at this. They quickly morphed into generalized mayhem. That is kind of, for me, the key of this article. They quickly morphed into generalized mayhem. that was relayed and celebrated on social networks. So it seemed like this is the key, or this is at least like one of the keys. Social networks, right? Haven't we talked about the Arab Spring and how it seems that social media played a big part in these different disgruntled citizens across many different nations in the Middle East, in Africa? It played a part in them being able to organize and coordinate and in some cases successfully carry out revolution. Let's just take a look at that. I should have pulled this up. Let's see. I'm going to do the Wikipedia Arab Spring. And what I like about this article, and we've come to this at least a couple times now. Here you see all the different countries that were affected by the so-called Arab Spring. And this is an event that occurred, like I said, where essentially unrest and revolution and rebellions and uprisings spread like wildfire across this region right here, the Middle East and mostly northern Africa. So this is an event that took place roughly from, of course, the 17th of December, 2010 to December 2012. And they have a table here where they go country by country and status of the protests. By now, most of them are pretty much done. Of course, there is the Syrian civil war, which is still ongoing right now. There's a civil war still going on right now from 2011. So we're now 12 years into this civil war because of the Arab Spring. And then it tells you like the results of what happened. You know, one of the more famous ones was the very beginning, Tunisia, overthrow of Zain el Abidine Ben Ali, right? And then, so that was Tunisia. And then, what was the one? Not Oman, let's see, Egypt, Syria, Yemen, Djibouti, Libya. That's the one I'm thinking of. Libya, the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. You remember this guy? He's the one that always like was pretty eccentric. He'd always like be wearing like aviator sunglasses and dressed up in military garb. I'm surprised that they don't have some of those pictures on here. Oh, here you go. This one's pretty good. He doesn't look like a crazy dictator at all. Okay, so you had this. Okay, you had this. And furthermore, I'm going to share another article. Let's just get into it now. Russia and the Color Revolution. This is from CSIS, or Center for Strategic International Studies. This was put out in 2014. Okay, this was around the time of the Crimea crisis and annexation. Look what it says here. And I'm sorry, to repeat. I know some of you have already heard this a couple times over, but there's always new people joining the channel, and I think it's worth repeating and reviewing. The British strategist Liddell Hart stressed the need to understand rival views of grand strategy and military developments, or, quote, the other side of the hill, end quote. A range of Russian and Belarusian military and civil experts presented a very different view of global security and the forces behind it at the Russian Ministry of Defense's third Moscow Conference on International Security on May 23rd, 2014. The first session of the conference presented an before we get to the overthrows, an overview of the security situation, focusing on what Russian experts called, quote unquote, the color revolution. Russian analysts have used the term since the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2012 in discussing the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, and the Tulip Revolution that took place in uh, Kyrgyzstan in 2005. Russian military officers now tied the term color revolution to the crisis in Ukraine and what they saw as a new US and European approach to warfare. You see that? A new US and European approach to warfare that focuses on creating destabilizing revolutions in other states as a means of serving their security interests at low cost, yeah, and with minimal casualties. So honestly, it's like, why not? Why have I mean, it kind of makes sense. Why have a big conventional war where thousands of people die? Um, Economies are destroyed. Of course, like economies are obviously affected by this, but I think anyone would probably agree that conventional war is probably a worse option than doing this, encouraging people in other countries to meet your security needs and interests. Okay, it was seen as posing a potential threat to Russia in the near abroad, to China in Asia. This is a weird sentence. I'm going to read it how it's written. It was seen as posing a potential threat to Russian in the near abroad, to China and Asia states not aligned with the U.S., and as a means of destabilizing states in the Middle East, Africa, Central Asia, and South Asia. Later on, key Russian officers and officials presented a view of the U.S. and in the West as deliberately destabilizing nations in North Africa, the Middle East, and the rest of the world for their own ends. And of course, if this is happening, when was this? Was in 2014? I just said, right? I just want to double check. Yeah, May 28th, 2014. So they are obviously referring to the Arab Spring. And let's take a look at that map again. Northern Africa and the Middle East. And it seems to have succeeded spectacularly. I don't know if they met all their goals. I don't even know if this actually is a thing. I can't say for sure. No one's actually really, I don't know. But I do. It just makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me that this would have happened organically, just like the French riots. That is the main topic of this video. It doesn't seem organic to me. You know, seems more like someone from the outside stoking flames. Um, and there's probably many different parts of any given operation, but a key part of it would be social media because it allows people to quickly and easily uh, come together, coordinate, and move forward together. People that you don't even know on the other side of your country, it's easy to coordinate with them through social media. All you have to do is you organize a protest or whatever, and I mean, and there you go, big protest in Cairo, everybody be there. And there's like more to it than that, I'm sure. But so going back to this, senior Russian officials are also using the term color revolution in ways that are far more critical than in the past. For example, the Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the United States and the European Union of an attempt to stage yet another color revolution in Ukraine, and said during the conference that attempts to impose homemade recipes for internal changes on other nations without taking into account their own traditions and national characteristics, to engage in the export of democracy, quote unquote, have a destructive impact on international relations and result in an increase of the number of hotspots on the world map. So with all that in mind, let's go back to this. From Nahel, violent protests spread with astounding speed and intensity. They quickly morphed into generalized mayhem that was relayed and celebrated on social networks. Which that's interesting because does that remind you of anything that's happened in our country recently, namely this? Now, I can't point fingers, and I don't know. I frankly do not know. Well, no, I kind of have some ideas, but You know, based on what we just read from that security conference, um, it would seem like, oh, well, this is happening in the United States. This is happening in France. So is it someone from outside those countries that's doing it? Yeah, it could be. It definitely could be. I don't know. Uh, but it could be people within the country too that have their own goals for the country itself. You know, I would encourage you to go watch that video I did with Troy recently, just a couple days ago, where we talking about the future of the United States and the future of the world, and what seems to be like the two sides of this conflict right now: the globalists versus the nationalists. I'm not so sure that either side is all too incredibly good. I do think one's probably better than the other. You know, you have to kind of pick the lesser of two evils. More importantly, you need to try and be involved yourself, be involved in local government, and if you have the resume, if you have the ability, maybe higher up government. Um, you know, be involved in all arenas as much as possible. But it's just, I don't know. We can you can fight back in legitimate ways, but it seems like there are these crazy things that are going on. Is this maybe some kind of retaliation by Russia, maybe on France? I don't know. It seems like this is pretty much in line with this. Here in the United States, you had someone that died while they were under arrest. In France, the same thing. So maybe it's the same group, entity, whatever, that's perpetrating the same thing or helping to stoke the flames. You know, I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think, but I cannot seriously think that it's organic. I just cannot. My best guess, if I were to put down my guess, and it would be a guess, is that it's not organic. All right, continuing. Much of the violence was concentrated in cities, large towns, and their disadvantaged housing projects, leaving France once again grappling with its decades-old failure to better integrate generations of immigrants and their France-born children who complain of systemic discrimination. But the staggering nationwide tallies of destruction. So here's some of the actual numbers: more than 6,000 vehicles and 12,400 trash bins set ablaze, more than 1,100 buildings attacked. Weren't limited to previously recognized hotspots. This time, smaller communities were impacted too. In Kuisak, oh, I'm not going to read that paragraph, but I have a quote from the Kuisak mayor, Sergei Katala. It says here, well, first we're going to have this quote from French President Emmanuel Macron. He suspects that video games or videos of unrest on social networks encourage copycat violence. Yeah, probably because he's aware of like the tactics of color revolutions. Just again, who knows who's doing it? Is he in on that kind of stuff? I don't know, but of course he knows. I'm sure that all heads of state and government officials know about, this whole idea of destabilizing other countries. The question is it coming from the inside or from the outside? I don't know. Okay, Kathala, which is the mayor of Kuisak, says it's one-upmanship, a way of showing off. So talking about like, you see a video on TikTok and it's like, oh, that's what they're doing in well, I'm gonna do it here, only better in Yutz. So that's probably what's going on. Now there's this article here from the Times of Israel. I can't really read some of this, or else I'd probably get in trouble with YouTube. But you can see it here. Israel has declared war on France, according to Luciano Mondino, the author of this article. I just wanted to read one thing here. It says Europe's major cities, at least in the West, are consolidated into projection that by 2050, 14% of the continent's population will be Muslim, and that translates into 75 million inhabitants. To this, of course, it must be made clear that any statistics, especially in a country like France, which is secular, are strongly linked to deductions often drawn from the nationalities from which migratory flows originate. So, I want to comment on this, okay, because again, sometimes there's the tendency to become a zealot, right? And by zealot, I mean this. Let's go back to the definition of zealot. Merriam-Webster, a zealous person, especially a fanatical partisan. Capitalized, a member of a fanatical sect arising in Judea during the 1st century AD, and militantly opposed to Roman domination of Palestine. In Oxford Learners, it says a person who is extremely enthusiastic about something, especially religion or politics. And then in Webster's 1828, it says one who engages warmly in any cause and pursues his object with earnestness and ardor. It is generally used in dispraise or applied to one whose ardor is intemperate and censurable. The fury of zealots was one cause of the destruction of Jerusalem. So I use this term basically to describe the behavior of like tribalism, being just really rigid, sticking to one political party or the other, or one social cause or the other, and basically just being part of the problem where you're basically just adding noise to the echo chamber. That's not us. That's not our church. We don't teach that. We're moderate and we try and find common ground. And the only thing that we do rigidly stick to is the gospel of Jesus Christ and the Savior and what he taught. And one thing he taught was to agree with thine enemies while thou art in the way. We read in Daniel what you do when you're in the occupation of Babylon. You don't become a zealot. You don't fight. You don't dig your feet in. You allow God to impose those punishments upon you and do the best you can under the circumstances. Pray for relief, and just do what you can. And you serve. You serve. You turn the other cheek. You serve those that abuse you, essentially. And I'm talking like in a general sense. Like, I'm not talking about like if you're in an abusive relationship or a situation, you should find help. That's like separate from what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about, generally speaking, dealing with strangers, dealing with groups, nations, philosophies and stuff like that. Turn the other cheek, but don't go against the commandments. You always obey the commandments. So this article is a little bit more on the zealot side. There's a lot of, I think, very valid points in it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you're interested, I'll put it in the description below. But the other side that I would point out, like I've pointed out many times, is that even though this whole situation with Europe as a whole may be bad, with you have clashes between different groups of people. Some of those people come from faraway places over here. Remember, as we've done videos talking about the spread of the gospel, there are countries that we cannot enter. Okay? There are countries that we, in a way, can kind of enter via internet for those that are in those countries that come across our church, want to learn more. And I'm sure that happens plenty. But other times, the Lord moves people around. Now, it could be in like the more benign cases like me and Jenica, where, we're over here in the United States and I've lived in Utah my whole life until my late 20s, then Arizona, and then Texas, and then back to Arizona, and now in Kansas. And I moved, and I know that the Lord has had a hand in it. One, so that I could work and support my family, and Jenica's never had to work since we had our first child. Um, in this case, I'm in Kansas because everything is so doggone expensive anywhere west of Kansas. I'd prefer to stay somewhere in the Southwest. We were looking at Texas and looking at staying in Arizona, maybe going to the Vegas area, Utah, you know, home, what I identify typically as home. That's where I wanted to stay, but the Lord had other plans, and He brought me to somewhere where it actually turned out, I think, better than if we had stayed back there. But that's just for me personally. So there's like a lot of moving around of people in that way. That's gone on forever. But sometimes it's more extreme. People are displaced because of war, from places affected by the Arab Spring, like Syria still is to this day. And then other places too, Afghanistan. We've talked about Afghanistani refugees coming to Utah, a lot of them coming to Utah and other places, people from, all over this whole region. So do not get to be too much of a zealot as you think about your political beliefs and you're like, oh, this is just horrible and awful. Well, you know what? Maybe the West asked for it, for one. But number two, there's a lot of good that's coming out of it for some individuals that are now in a place of liberty, or at least limited liberty, or more liberty than where they came from, where now they can have exposure to the missionaries, um, and maybe through a couple generations. Maybe the first generation that comes over, they kind of like stick to their ways, stick to their religion. But you know how things go. I was talking to Rabbi Gerfine, and by the way, we were supposed to talk yesterday, but it didn't work out with my schedule this time. So it's not going to be till next week that I put out a video with me and him doing an interview. But he told me how he went to Israel. I can't remember exactly when, if it was like the 60s or something like that, but it was sometime around then. And he never left. He moved to Israel. He married a Finnish woman who had also made Aliyah to Israel. She was Jewish. And they had children together. And the way that he explained it, because we were talking about language, is like, of course, they speak their native languages from the United States and Finland, like a native, because they are natives, or they were natives. But then the next generation, it kind of starts to, yeah, they speak English, for example, but they also speak Hebrew very, very well because they grew up with it. And then by the time it gets to the grandkids, they don't even speak English, and they only speak to him in Hebrew. It's like that's how quickly things can change. You know, and so it's going to be the same situation up here. And for you Europeans that watch this, I'd like to hear you chime in. I know that I feel like I've seen it. I'd have to like rack my brain, but I feel like I saw that when I was in Spain. Spain, oh my gosh, I had people from all over the place. There were a lot of Africans there. There were a lot of Middle Eastern people there. There were a lot of Central and South Americans there. There's a lot of people from Central and South America that come to Europe, and a favorite place is Spain because of the language. In fact, most of the success on my mission seemed to be among Latin Americans in Spain. But I was familiar with these areas where you had a lot of migrants that kind of stuck to certain parts of the city, certain neighborhoods. Um, and we worked with a lot of them. Like I remember there was a Bolivian girl actually that I ended up baptizing. I didn't teach her. I was the first one. Okay, I'm not trying to like make this about me, but I was the first one to meet her dad. This was in Palma on this island over here, Mallorca. I met her dad, but he was in another elders area, and so they taught them. But I had a lot. I like did a lot of like I had a good relationship with the family, so I came over sometimes for discussions, and then I ended up baptizing the daughter. So they were first generation from Bolivia, and she was born there too. But I've kind of like kept in contact a little bit since the mission, and now she speaks Spanish just like any other Spaniard. She doesn't have a Bolivian accent. She's like completely and totally um, part of Spanish culture, yeah, Spanish culture essentially. She's a Spaniard for all intents and purposes, even though she was originally from Bolivia. So the point is that these people coming over here, although terrible things can happen, like what's happened in France, there is a silver lining and there is a good side that we should probably pay attention to. It's something that's probably much more important, frankly, because we're talking about the eternal welfare of individuals who come here. I don't have any numbers to share. I wish I did, but I'm sure that there's been people from those countries that have been baptized into the church, and I do know of one actually. You know what? In fact, hold on. Okay, so I guess we're gonna have a little bit of a picture time here. I decided to pull up some pictures from my mission. Now, this man right here, I did not baptize him, and he was in my first area, so I don't really remember what his name was, but I was astounded. I remember just being astounded that he was from Algeria, and he joined the church, and he gave us some raw honey, or like this, like, I don't know if it was raw, but he gave us like this, or this honey like fresh off the wherever he worked, and it tasted like it, and it was good, but I was just like, holy cow. This is someone that was once a Muslim that converted to the church. So I came across him a couple times, um, but that was a really neat experience for me. And yes, this is me before I gained 1,000 pounds. This is me later in the mission. This was in Martorell, which is a small town outside of Barcelona. And these three men, Prince, William, and Osei, they're from Ghana. Now, the church is doing really well in Ghana, so they didn't necessarily have to come to Spain to hear the gospel, although obviously the Lord had his own plan in their individual lives. But all three of them, they joined the church. We taught them the gospel, and they decided to join. And Prince, in particular, he was like really, really enthusiastic about it. In fact, we had him come to general conference the first time just because we were teaching them we were teaching them not the 6 lessons, but we were using preach my gospel at this point, and had him over to see general conference, and he got really giddy about it, and he wanted to see the baptismal font. He was just like, "Where's your baptismal font? I want to see that." It was really like that. He was really excited, and they were too, but he was like ultra excited. But they were from Ghana. Um, this was at the end of my mission when I was in Valencia, Spain. We have Clemson and Joy from Nigeria, which is similar to Ghana as far as there's a lot of Christians in the country, particularly in the south. They just like Ghana, they speak their own like tribal languages, but they, you know, um, English is like the lingua franca essentially. So we baptized these two, and they had children, but they weren't old enough to be baptized. But again, in Nigeria is another place in Africa that does very well as far as the church goes, but they got baptized in Spain. All right. So next one, this is during the Fallas in Valencia, and I love these Spanish dresses that I can't remember what they're called, but at this time of year, which this happens in March in Valencia. They dress up in these traditional dresses, and there's parades, and there's all sorts of activities that go on. I love these so much. I would love to see Jenica wear one of these. I love them. And during the Fayez celebration, now here you go. Here you go, Western culture. So throughout the city, they build up uh, these these things here. I'm not exactly sure what they're made of, but they have like a wood skeleton essentially. Um, But what they do is they build these up. This is like a one that's on the smaller side, by the way. They get really big in some cases, and each neighborhood, they pool their funds. They make one of these. They decide who's going to design it, whatever, and they stay up for like a week or two. And then at the end, on a particular night, all throughout the city, they burn them with fire, and it's pretty incredible looking. I didn't really get to see it too much because of our curfew, but in another area, I was able to, just because of the time of year and the lighting, I was able to actually see one as we were walking home. But anyway, there's a lot of this like kind of like horrible imagery that you'll see sometimes. Some of them are like okay, they're decent, but other ones are just like pretty terrible. Like you have some devils and demons down here. Of course, it looks like that's Osama bin Laden now that I'm looking at it. But just like really kind of grotesque looking things, and it's just very typical. Although, like I said, some of them are perfectly fine, but um, there's just kind of like a darkness. It seems to me there was a lot of good, but also a lot of darkness that I saw in Europe and in Spain. And then I just have a few other ones. This is the Madrid Temple. This is from my dorm room, I guess you would say, in the MTC in Madrid. And just right outside, you had the temple, and you had this just incredible view of it. And it was so beautiful every single night. That was a very special time in my life. Here's me in Mallorca. That's that island I was showing you right here. This was at, what was it called? Yeah, Formentor, I thought we called it Formentera. Cap Formentor. Anyway, it's up here at the very tip of the island. Just really blue waters. Gosh, man, I'm getting like really nostalgic. Oh, we already saw that. Mecha Cola. We bought this at like a I guess you'd call it a Middle Eastern or an Arab type store. You know, you have like these ethnic snores. You have these ethnic stores. Just like here in the United States, there's places that you can go to get authentic, whatever, Latin American, whatever country, foods or Asian or whatever. Well, they had a bunch of these in Spain because there's a lot of people from Morocco, but also other places in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and Mecha Cola is a thing. We would go there and try out their stuff. And so that just goes to show you how many there are there. I mean, this is back in like 2000, from 2004 to 2006. And yeah, occasionally we had copies of the Book of Mormon in Arabic. We couldn't, like, if we knew that someone was Muslim, we couldn't actively proselyte them, but if they asked to know more, then we could cautiously talk to them. I can't remember if we had to get like the mission president's permission to move forward, but that never happened to me anyway. This is Prince and Osei again. In fact, this may have been during General Conference. I think that's when this picture was taken, and he was he was excited to see the baptismal font. And then here's that Bolivian girl I was telling you about. Her name is Leanne, and I was really happy that I got to baptize her. I had contacted her dad on the street. We were doing like this. Gosh, it's been so long. I forgot all the terms and stuff that we use, but we'd like occasionally go out and just be on the street, uh, like a couple companionships together, or like two or more companionships all together with like a big thing, like a big rollout kind of like paper on the ground where we'd like draw stuff and draw out the plan of salvation or whatever. And in one case, we had this big like Book of Mormon, like a cardboard Book of Mormon costume, a Libro de Mormon costume that you'd put on, and so someone would be the big Book of Mormon walking around. And anyway, it was during one of those times I contacted her dad, and he's like, yeah, come on over. And the mom and dad didn't really get very interested, but her and her little brother did, and they got baptized. So that's why I was able to do the baptism. They were in another area, but like I said, I got to teach them a couple times, and I don't know, we were just friends. So I baptized her, and it was great. And then this was one of my earlier mission successes. Again, someone that wasn't in my area. It was they were in this. His name was Mecca, not like Mecca Cola. Mecca. He was from Nigeria. We were just like walking down the street, and I felt a pretty strong impression to go talk to this guy that was sitting down. And so I talked to him, and he ended up being in the other missionaries area. But we invited him to church, and he came and he brought Mecca. And the main guy that I talked to, he didn't really care much for the church, or he just wasn't interested, so he stopped coming. But Mecca was all about it, and I was there long enough to see him get the Melchizedek priesthood. It was like fast, and he was all about it. He had a very strong testimony. All right, so anyway, um, okay, that's the end of story time. So I can tell you that there are people all over the world in Europe. There are people all over the world, all over the world, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not ignorant to the fact that there's problems that arise, like what we're seeing in France and other things like that. But instead of being a black and white thinker, we should look at the shades of gray and see that, oh, well, yeah, there's some bad, but there's also good. And in this case, a lot of good where these people are able to um, receive the gospel, you know, either sooner than they would have, or just maybe the only time that they ever would have. They wouldn't have back in Syria or Iraq or all these different places. I have to find the list. I wrote down a list of all the different countries that I met people from, and it was a very big list. I met people from all over the place in Spain. So it was a good thing. Now, let's get back to this, and let's try and go ahead and finish this up. Where are we at? Here's a couple Wikipedia articles. Here's a video. I'm sure you've probably seen this. Most of you probably have. If not, you can find it here. You can just look it up on YouTube, whatever. Nahel Merzouk right here, right? Just a couple more things here. Symbols of the state, such as town halls, schools, and police stations, as well as other buildings, were attacked. The Interior Ministry reported that more than 5,000 vehicles had been set on fire, along with 10,000 garbage cans. Nearly 1,000 buildings had been burnt, damaged, or looted. And that's the part that always gets me. Looting? Really? These other things, still really not good. But like looting takes it to a complete different level where essentially you see a bunch of opportunists. They're like, oh, chaos is breaking down. This is my chance to go steal stuff. You know, whereas at least like some of the other things, it's like, well, we're doing it because we're upset. We're trying to prove a point, and that's still not the right answer. But looting is in a category of its own. That's just like takes it to the nth degree. Like, oh, really? That's how you're going to honor his memory and his cause, so to speak, by looting stores. Anyway, 250 police stations and gendarmeries had been, I don't know what that is. Gendarmerie, I don't know, had been attacked, and more than 700 police officers had been injured. Dang, 700. That is a lot. And then you have this article. This is about the incident itself. This one is about the protests. There's a couple things here. Here's an example of what we were reading just in that last article. In Montes-la-Jolie, a town 40 kilometers southwest of Paris, the town hall was set ablaze after being firebombed on the night of the 27th of June, burning until 3:15. I guess that's probably local time over there. Yeah, there's not anything else here. Anyway, okay, we talked about that. Now, okay, I have two articles here that seem to indicate that things are kind of like dying down. Now, this one was on the 5th. France riots subside as Darmanin faces Senate questions. Yeah, that's why I had this article up in the first place. According to the Wikipedia article, it went from the 27th of June to the 4th of July. So that would be in accordance with this Reuters article. And then there's this one from Euronews.travel. Is it safe to travel to France right now? Expert advice on whether to cancel your trip. And this is as of today, the day that I'm recording this, the 7th of July. It appears that the most serious unrest is over after 850 people were arrested last weekend, the 1st and 2nd of July. Oh yeah, I thought this was interesting. Around 17 million UK citizens visit France each year, the vast majority soaking up the old country's culture and sunny coastlines without incident. So just a 17. That's another number that comes up quite a bit on this channel. And then on here, did I have anything? No, I'm going to use this article as the date, because on my timeline right here, whenever I put things, I always put a reference where I'm getting the dates from and stuff like that. And so, I haven't put it yet, but it's going to go over here in column R. So, and I guess I better put a new entry here that French riots end. And then I use a different color for that. Use like a dark red. Well, I actually can't remember. I have to go back and see what yeah, right here. Oh, it's that brown color. Yeah. So that went on for a while. I'm putting it on my timeline. Let me zoom out. Is it that big of a thing? I don't know. I don't know if it was or wasn't. Was this an attempt by like Russia, for example? Do they have their own psychological operations program? And are they successful at doing counter color revolutions? I don't know. Is this in line with, the powers that be with social engineering and stuff like that? Are they the ones that perpetrated this? I don't know. That's what's frustrating. I don't know. But it happened, so I'm going to take note of it. And there you go. A lot of different things to think about. But that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it. And I'll talk to you guys later.